The pioneer Russian Indologist Gerasim Stepanovich Lebedev left Kolkata in the year 1797. He lived in Kolkata for 10 long years and tried to collect materials on different aspects of Indian life, of Indian culture. He was the pioneer Russian Indologist. He was the founder of the modern Indian theatre in Bengal in 1795. We'll be meeting him after few days, but what he initiated was the study on India in Russia. Practically in the 18th century, the study on India was initiated from different corners. There was no academy or the Asian Academy for study or doing research work on the Asian countries. Sergei Uvarov, who was the secretary in the Russian embassy in Paris, gave a proposal to the education minister of Russia, Mr. Razumovsky, for this Asian Academy or the Asian Museum. Mainly on the initiative of Mr. Razumovsky and some other scholars, the dream came into reality, and the Asian Museum or the Asian Study Center was first initiated in the year 1818 in St. Petersburg. Since its inception, the studies were there on the languages of different Asian countries, and regarding India, the studies were on Tamil, Marathi, Gujarati, Sanskrit, and along with it, Bengali language and literature. They started the comparative understanding on different Indian languages, particularly between Sanskrit and Russian. The same year, in 1818, in Kolkata, the Asiatic Society, which was founded by the Britishers, and the main initiator was Sir William Jones, who was very close associate with Gerasim Lebedev. This institute created, opened new paths for understanding different aspects of the life of the people of Asia and particularly of India. This 1818, the Asiatic Society, when it came into being much little earlier, in 1818, a Bengali newspaper, Digdarshan, first published a small article on Russia. But the article on Russia, it was not just an ordinary one. The format and the style of presentation was unique because it was in the form of question and answer. Like someone is asking, where is the country situated? Where is Russia situated? The answer is given accordingly. What about the rulers of the country? What about the citizens of the country? About the peasantry? About the common men of the country? About the culture of Russia? So that created a new approach to study history and culture of any particular country. The same year, Mr. Rajendralal Mitra, who was the first Indian chairperson of the Asiatic Society, he wrote also a unique book called History of Russia. Perhaps in modern India, that was the beginning to study Russia and a people with serious notes. Earlier, there were anecdotes, there were stories, there were fables, there were illustrated versions, but not exactly what both the countries are, how the people live there. In 1818, Rajendra Mitra, whose chair is still kept in Asiatic society with great honor, whose ancestral house is situated in the eastern part of Kolkata, wrote many other articles in different journals about Russia. So the initial stage started with that, and slowly the collection of books from both the sides started with the initiative of the scholars, with the initiative of the research workers. We find that as this Asiatic Museum or Asiatic Center was formed in Russia, there were some crazy, not to term it exactly like that, but really they were crazy to study more and more about India and her people. They were so sincere that whether they are sleeping or they are awakened or they are working, everything was related to India, India's different scripts and culture. We all know that in the winter, Russian people they watch snow, and in Leningrad or in those days it was St. Petersburg. It was so deep that the snowfall on the window panes created different patterns, different motifs. And this Mr. Petrov could see even some Indian letters in those ice patterns. He was encouraged by Mr. Belinsky, who was greatly educated and sincere people who tried to collect materials on India and her people from different sources, personally contacted different people, and got hold of enough materials. Even he collected in those days a wonderful article on a day in Calcutta. He translated that article from English to Russian, and it was nothing but about the life of an European in the capital of British India, in Kolkata, and how they are behaving with the commoners, with the people of India, their attitude, their inhuman treatment to the Indian people, and their luxury, their abundance of property, and their feudal attitude as a colonial power to India and her people were all depicted in that article. Belinsky collected different materials from different sources of his, and as we know about it, that Mr. Belinsky's creation for the Asiatic Society, I mean for the Oriental Studies Institute, was immense, and it was definitely a praiseworthy thing. When these materials were being collected, the famous Russian poet Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin was entrusted with the job of pen down the history of Russia. And Pushkin was interested during that period of time to know more about the Indian history, India's culture, India's people. Even he was looking for the new trade route, direct trade route between Russia and India. 1835, he was very active, and we all know that the years passed like that very quickly, and there were many visitors to India during this period of time. But one very important visit was made by Prince Alexei Saltykov in 1840-41 and in 1845. And twice during his visit, he visited Calcutta. He has written down his experience, and it was not like Vasily Vereshchagin, as we discussed earlier, that Vasily Vereshchagin was doing the sketches and his wife was taking the notes during that time of nature, of flora and fauna, of people, of culture, of customs. In case of Prince Alexei Saltykov, he was all in one. He was not a writer. He was, of course, taking notes in details about the people, about the culture, about the geography, about the history. At the same time, he was doing enough sketches, enough drawings about the people and culture of India. So 1841 to 1845, as this developed slowly, day by day, the knowledge about India was developing in Russia, and Russian people was also getting acquainted with India and her culture. Asiatic society by this time were very much aware about the interest of the Russian intelligentsia, about studies on India, and by this time, since they published 28 volumes of books on India in particular, along with Russia, they presented the whole set to the authority in Russia, to the St. Petersburg Center of Oriental Studies. These were unique one for getting to know each other. At the same time, there were also some British missionaries. Among them was very famous Reverend James Long, who is till date very popular to the progressive Indian people, because being a missionary, he sided over with the Indian agricultural laborers, particularly of the indigo plantation people, and against the Indian indigo planters, who were the owner of the plantations, for their extreme exploitation of the Indian agricultural laborers. And even for that, he was sentenced to the prison by the British authority. There was a popular saying, because there was another gentleman called Kangal Horinath who founded Bengali newspaper, who sided with the poor Indian agricultural laborers. Because of their support, the Britishers didn't like both of them, and the popular as they became to the Indian people, even the songs were composed by their name, the poems were composed by their names, as Oshomaye Horish Molo, Longer Holo Karagar. That Harish had an untimely death and Long was imprisoned. So the poor agricultural laborers, the indigo laborers, indigo agricultural workers, were practically orphaned because of this situation, because Harish died at a very young age and Long was sentenced into the prison. However, the contact between these Indian people and the Russian people was growing, and I mentioned about James Long, the Reverend James Long. Why? Because it was he who, on his own capacity, wrote a wonderful article in the Journal of Asiatic Society about the new study of Russia in different parts of the world and in India, and about the study of India in Russia. This was published in the Journal of the Asiatic Society. And as these contacts between Asiatic Society and the Institute of Oriental Studies or the Museum of Asia was growing, the new roads were also open, and the new roads led to the contact between the Botanical Survey of India, the Botanical Gardens of India, of course with Asiatic Society, because Asiatic Society was functioning also as the museum before the foundation of the Indian Museum. So the knowledge, the interest to know more about India was growing, and the interest to know about the minerals was also growing, minerals of both the countries. There were exchanges of minerals, and the papers also were exchanged between the two countries. And thus, a very interesting thing also happened. Since there was interest about the flora and fauna, the interest grew for the botanical saplings of both the countries. It is noteworthy that the Botanical Survey of India, and in particular the Botanical Gardens of Kolkata, they sent nearly 1,500 samples of different plants, including 63 plants from Himalaya, to the Russian counterparts. And also Russian counterparts received, they sent also, as they received, they also sent some 1,000 samples of different Russian plants to the botanical gardens of Kolkata. We don't know whether these plants, both in Russia and in India, are still living or not. Whether the origins may not be there, the originals are not there, but their generations, next generation or the third generation or fourth generation, are definitely there, both in the botanical gardens of Kolkata and in the botanical gardens of St. Petersburg and in Moscow. And also appreciating the great role of the Asiatic Society in India, in Kolkata, the authority, the education department of the Russian ministry, they awarded Asiatic Society with a gold medal of high appreciation. These unique exchanges created new openings of Russian-Indian friendship. And Asiatic Society, which is housed on the Park Street of Kolkata or the Mother Teresa Saroni of Kolkata, and the St. Petersburg Institute or the Moscow Institute, both the countries are benefited immensely with the help for each other. And we suppose that this year, when we are marking our bilateral relationship of higher level, which was between us as the time-tested friendship, which has now reached the privileged strategic partnership, will be developing more and more. And the exchanges, the opinions, the visits will be shared between the two countries for the benefit of world humanity, and in particular for the Russian-Indian friendship. Long live Indo-Russian friendship.